want to start with a little story. A mother of a 6-year-old girl invited some people to dinner, and that evening at the table, the mom asked the daughter if she would say grace. She said, "I don't know what to say, Mommy." And the mom said, "Why don't you just say what you hear Mommy say?" The mom suggested. The daughter thought for a moment, bowed her head, and said, "Lord, why in the hell did I invite these people to dinner?" Happy Mother's Day. This little joke makes us laugh because we can see the humor in the child, seeing through the adult's kind of social appropriateness to the realness underneath. We've all been there, right? There's something like a dinner gathering that we're doing on the surface of our lives, but underneath there's a dissatisfaction with what is really actually happening. And to tie this in with our lesson on values, it seems like the mommy in the joke had some competing values, didn't she? On the one hand, she wants to be a good hostess and have her child participate in the event, valuing connection with others, obviously. But on the other hand, the child reveals another value of the mommy, that of rest and freedom from company and social commitments, right? And we can all relate. Competing values. You know, children are masterful at pointing out when our actions are not in alignment with the values that we're trying to teach them, right? Yeah. And the reason children are so adept at it is because they don't have the social filters that keep us from doing the same things, right? So you see, we as adults, we've kind of learned to accept that life is complicated. And sometimes we feel it necessary to do things or make choices that contradict the very values we hold dearly, right? The truth is, like the mommy in the joke, you know, we often hold competing values and are kind of working to sort out what we hold as our core values. And this is an important lesson because we're all challenged to learn them. And what we're challenged to learn is which of our values are non-negotiable, even when no one is looking, or even when there is extreme social pressure to compromise. Let me give you an example. So several years ago, I had this client, and she wanted to improve her life. She wanted to improve her life kind of all the way around. And she was a single mom, and she was raising a daughter who's around 8 years old or so. And she was living in a city not far from where she grew up, actually. And she came to me absolutely miserable and frozen by indecision. Because becoming a younger parent, it interrupted her education. And she was working in a career that really wasn't very fulfilling, and she kind of felt stuck in her entire living situation, but she really just couldn't see other options. And in our conversations, when we were discussing maybe she could apply for jobs elsewhere because the little place where she was living didn't really have a lot of opportunities, you know, could she move to a bigger city perhaps where there would be more job opportunities? And her eyes would just kind of light up, and then she would remind me, but my daughter's dad lives here and my family also lives nearby, and she didn't feel like she could move and disappoint everyone. But through many conversations, we kept coming back to the realization that she was trapped between two values. She had one value of stability, and then she had this other value of personal growth or fulfillment. Like she didn't want her life to be unsatisfactory. And this woman's story is so familiar because it is almost a universal situation that we all find ourselves in from time to time. That of being stuck in consequences or choices that we made a long time ago, and at the same time holding a deep desire to move forward. The choices that we make in these moments really do reveal which value we hold dearest. And at the beginning of our conversations, this woman revealed that she valued stability foremost, stability. But was that the value she should have held in a non-negotiable status? Right? And one of the jobs of parenting is to teach this new generation values. And this young mom was also trying to teach her daughter values at the same time she was trying to figure out her own. And we all do that because, as I said, I believe one of our lifelong assignments is to figure out personal values and how to prioritize them. And we can accept the values handed to us from our parents, but until we learn from our own experiences, they're not really our values. You see what I'm saying? So just to make sure we're clear, values are principles, ideals, or standards or qualities that inform and shape the way we live our lives and the intentions and the decisions that we make. Values are not dependent upon anything in the external realm. Ernest Holmes will say values are first cause, meaning they are always present. They're always awaiting our choice. But on the human level, we're actually encouraged to share the values that society tells us we should value. Here in America, I'm sure you were taught to value qualities like independence. We're also taught to value fame. We're also taught to value personal freedom. We're also taught to value honesty. Pretty much we all are taught those very same values. We're encouraged to make choices that got us out of our parents' homes. Right? Our parents want us to value things that get us moving on, right? Chasing the dream of celebrity or fame or prosperity, and we're hopefully doing it all honestly and clearly, right? And there's nothing wrong with these values, but are they your highest values? Do these values reflect the truth of your spiritual being or your soul? John Maxwell clarified, he said, your core values are the deeply held beliefs that authentically describe your soul. Your soul. You're always at choice to align with those core values, our highest values, and consciously and intentionally allow them to inform our perceptions and our decisions, how we talk and what we do. But first, we've got to identify with our highest core values as our own. So how do we decide? How do we decide which values are our highest values? Maxwell gives us a clue, doesn't he? Because he says they should be the ones that authentically describe your soul. The law says, as above, so below. And what that means to me is that the qualities of God are our qualities too. So we might want to start right there when we are trying to figure out what our values are. What do we know God to be? We know God is love, balance, order, intelligence, peace, joy, abundance, serenity, light. There's lots and lots of words, just to name a few, but that is the way that we can describe that inner wholeness that we're learning to always be present in. After the service, or at the end of my lesson, I'm going to pass out this handout to help you identify your core values. So later, I would hand them to you now, but you wouldn't pay any attention to me, and I like your attention. But anyway, on this handout, on one side, there are some questions to ask yourself, like, who do you admire? What inspires you to take action? And when do you most feel like yourself? There's some questions to begin to think about. What are my values? And on the other side, you're going to find a list of value words, common values to work with, and instructions about how to pick out your own personal core values. But let's remember that our souls are connected to God. If we want to identify our core values, we want to look at those big words I said before, love, joy, balance, all those words. What if we started there and decided to live every day in alignment with our inner joy, our inner sense of balance, our inner order, our inner peace? It's always there. What if we valued those qualities more than anything else and made choices to make sure those were our expressions? But how does it work? First, you have to identify what your value word is, and then you have to define it. You can look it up in the dictionary, figure out, kind of what it is, but then you got to figure out what it means to you. Not just what Webster says, but what do you say it means to you? And how do you live it every day? And I want to give you an example of what living a value would look like. So let's take the word compassion. If compassion speaks to you as a core value, then that probably means that you want to lessen the suffering of others or help others heal their pain. That could be a definition of compassion, right? Compassion. But to further personalize it, you might want to say that compassion means standing in non-judgment. Something like that, like I'm compassionate. And once defined, then you got to figure out, okay, what does that look like? What does living in compassion look like as a core value? And that would be saying things like, I want to be aware of the needs of others. I want to listen carefully without judgment, especially when someone's sharing a problem or something going on with them that's hard. I want to speak with kindness. I want to accept people for who they are. I want to forgive people when they make a mistake. Those would be actions of living in compassion. So after you select 2 or 3 to 5, I would say, core values, and determining the actions that line up with that, what if we developed a big commitment to actually live that way? You know, what I teach is when you make a commitment, resources follow commitment. Meaning that if we individually and collectively decided to live our values, which we do, the universe conspires and supports us in fulfilling that commitment to live by those values. Opportunities show up, solutions to problems unfold, and resources flow in so that the right connections are made. But guess what else shows up after you make a commitment to live by a value? Situations will show up that challenge us to choose our value again and again. Right after you make the commitment to something like that, Spirit will often draw to you the opposite of your commitment. Sort of like, do you really commit? Are you really going to be compassionate? Are you really going to choose compassion when the baby's screaming on the plane in the row behind you? Are you really going to be compassionate when the neighbor runs into your car? Are you really going to hold a heart of compassion when the latest politician does something crazy on the television? You're going to hold that compassion, right? But remember, earlier I said we spend our lives figuring out how to live our values consistently. Sometimes we pretend that if no one's watching, what we do doesn't really count, right? If the people around me are those I will never see again, do I really have to live my values out loud? Well, some nuns at a school actually thought they could address that inner thought that children have in a creative way. They were teaching their students about fairness and sharing and honesty. And so the children were kind of lined up in the cafeteria. This is a Catholic elementary school, and they're lined up for lunch. And at the head of the table is a large pile of apples. And the nun made a note and posted it on the apple tray. Take only one, God is watching. And moving further along the cafeteria lunch line, at the other end of the table was a large pile of chocolate chip cookies. And a smart child made a note for that. It said, take all you want. God is watching the apples. We laugh, but I think it's human nature to have this idea that we don't have to stay in our integrity when we're not being watched. We don't have to live a high value-driven life when we find ourselves all alone, right? But what you have to know is your soul is watching the apples. Meaning your soul is craving the opportunity to express out in the world, like we talked about in Sacred Cup, as light, as love, as a transformational energy force. That's why so many of us do better by like having an accountability partner. I actually looked it up. There's a study done that shows you have a 65% chance of reaching a goal when you have general accountability. The likelihood increases to 95% if you have a specific accountability structure in place with an identified person. Perhaps that would be a practitioner. Perhaps that would be a friend. Perhaps there's someone that you meet here. In other words, for many of us, it takes more than a sign by the apples to take only one apple. It takes more than an honest handshake to make a deal. It takes more than a commitment to ourselves to live in alignment with our highest values. And as I said, one of the beautiful things about being in a spiritual community is you can say, you know what? Would you hold me accountable? I really want to do this. Would you hold me accountable? We join together in a commitment to allowing the godness of ourself to be congruent in our experience of life. We see and know the highest and best for each other. And sometimes the person who is our accountability partner may not share the same values, which is tricky. So let me explain. Recently, Terry and I realized that I have a high value of interdependence. What that means is I cherish the opportunity to share and connect with others in getting our needs met, right? And she has a high value of self-reliance, meaning that she feels best when she and I meet our needs without really relying on help from others. Now, recently, a friend offered to help us in a very big way, and I was thrilled. And at the very same time in this conversation, she was less than thrilled. She was very reluctant to accept this offer of help. She's like, yeah, no. But we ended up allowing the help, but it required this meaningful conversation between the two of us of these conflicting values. There's a really big difference between wanting to connect and solve problems with the world and wanting to, be relying on ourselves. Which is better? There is not one that's better, but we had to do that. So as we explore love this summer, one of our big conversations we're going to have is talking about how values show up in relationships of every kind. Not just love relationships, but friendships, coworkers, values are at play all the time. Especially we're going to talk about values anchored in spiritual truth. Because as we evolve and grow, we come to realize that these core values are within us, and they've always been within us. And when we come to identify ourselves as a compassionate person, as a peaceful person, as a loving person, we're an expression of the divine. And those qualities are ours to express. But first, we've got to identify with them. We've got to say, that's who I am. We live them. And when we live something, we keep our attention on it. Find a way to remind yourself every day what your values are. Once you have them figured out, figure out a way that you can keep those in front of your mind. Because what we attend to, we invest our mental energy into. And we put our passion into those things that we identify ourselves with. Our passions become this big flashing arrow saying, go in this direction because this resonates with your values. Commit to keeping our eyes focused on the values we select. Let them inform your choices, your intentions, and your decisions. And commitment is a moment-to-moment thing. A moment-to-moment thing. It's not easily kept, but remember, resources follow commitment. So once you make the commitment, the universe will conspire with you. And you know what? When we live these values, when we live these God values, it just doesn't help us individually. It doesn't even just stop helping us here as a community. It helps the world when we live in our highest values. And I want to close with a quote from one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Mahatma Gandhi. If you've not read a lot of what he wrote, I invite you to do that. And he says, keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because they become your behaviors. Keep your behaviors positive because they become your habits. Keep your habits positive because they become your values. Keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. Let's practice our values together, and let's experience our lives getting more and more fulfilling as we allow them to become our destiny. And I'm going to invite Rebecca to give you all a value sheet. I put it on purple paper because our summer papers are purple and orange, our colors this summer. And if you do this value worksheet, actually, you're going to be a step ahead in the summer program because we're going to bring these back out, so to keep them handy. So with that, I invite you to live a value-driven life. I love you all. Happy Mother's Day.